Welcome to Bookish Mind Podcast, Season 4, Episode 7 today. We unpack the real secret to self-control. And it has less to do with willpower and more to do with what's around you.
Exactly.
We're constantly told that discipline, grit, willpower, these are like heroic personal qualities, almost a moral muscle we need to flex.
Right.
But what if that whole idea, that narrative about self-control is actually, well, a bit misleading?
Mm-hmm.
This deep dive is all about revealing some truly surprising insights into what really drives our behavior.
Yeah, and how you can take back control. But maybe not in the way you think, not by trying harder necessarily.
But by strategically shaping your environment.
It's a really profound reframe, isn't it? Our mission today is to, challenge that common assumption head on.
The idea that if you just tried harder, you'd be more disciplined.
Exactly. We're going to dig into some pretty groundbreaking research, some real-world examples
Mm-hmm.
that suggest it's far less about some internal battle against your urges and much more about the battleground itself, your surroundings.
Okay, so let's kick this off with a story that's, well, frankly, astonishing. Picture this. It's 1971. The Vietnam War is still raging.
Right.
And two congressmen, Robert Steele and Morgan Murphy, they're visiting the troops. And they stumble onto something that just sends shockwaves back home.
What did they find?
They found that over 15%, 15% of U.S. soldiers stationed there were addicted to heroin.
Wow. That high.
Yeah. And further research confirmed it was even more widespread. Something like 35% of service members had tried it, and maybe up to 20% were actively addicted.
That must have caused a huge panic back in the States.
Well, absolutely. It was a massive concern, a full-blown crisis, really. It even led President Nixon to create a special office just focused on addiction.
Okay.
And part of their job was tracking these soldiers when they came back to the U.S., which is where this researcher, Lee Robbins, comes in.
Ah, right. And her findings were the ones that just turned everything upside down.
Completely. Because what happened next is truly remarkable. See, the belief back then was that heroin addiction was basically a life sentence.
Permanent. Irreversible. That was the thinking.
Exactly. But Robin's study found something totally different. She tracked these soldiers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And only 5% of them became re-addicted within a year. 5%.
Just 5. After being addicted in Vietnam.
Yeah. And even after 3 years, only 12% relapsed. So think about that. Roughly 9 out of 10 soldiers who were addicted in Vietnam pretty much eliminated their addiction almost overnight, and mostly without any traditional rehab.
That's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? It just defied all the conventional wisdom.
Totally. And that's what makes it so fascinating. As Robbins' research showed, the key factor was this radical change in their environment.
Right. So in Vietnam, they were surrounded by cues.
Constantly. Heroin was cheap, it was easy to get, they were under immense stress from the war.
Plus, maybe friends using it, being thousands of miles from home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Disconnected from normal life, normal routines, their usual social networks. That whole context was just this potent trigger, like an accelerator for the habit.
And then they come back to the U.S.
And suddenly, their environment is stripped of almost all those powerful cues. The context changes, like, dramatically.
And the habit just faded, withered, like you said.
Yeah, it just withered away for most of them.
It's such a powerful illustration. And if you contrast that, think about a typical drug user today.
Yeah.
They get addicted in their usual environment, right? Yeah. Specific places, maybe specific people. Then they might go to rehab, a controlled setting, and get clean.
Sure.
But then what happens? They often go right back home, back to the old neighborhood, maybe the same friends, surrounded by all the cues that triggered the addiction in the first place.
And the relapse rates are notoriously high.
Exactly. Typically, something like 90% of heroin users become re-addicted when they return home from rehab. The Vietnam study showed the exact opposite outcome.
Wow.
Primarily because that environmental shift was so total, so abrupt.
This really makes you question that whole cultural narrative about personal responsibility, doesn't it?
It does.
We're so often taught, unhealthy behaviors, being overweight, smoking, addiction, they're signs of a lack of self-control, maybe even a moral failing.
Right. The idea is just try harder. More disciplined, stronger will. That's the fix.
But that narrative, maybe it's well-intentioned, but it seems to overlook this huge piece of the puzzle, the environment.
Which raises a really important question. What does recent research actually tell us about those people who seem really disciplined?
Yeah, the ones who look like they have incredible self-control.
Well, it turns out they aren't fundamentally different. It's not like they were born with extra willpower.
Okay, so what is different?
They're just better at structuring their lives. So they don't require heroic moment-to-moment willpower all the time. They maybe instinctively spend less time in tempting situations.
So it's like this interesting paradox. The people with the best self-control are actually the ones who need to use it the least.
Precisely. Because it's way, way easier to just avoid the temptation in the first place.
Than to constantly fight it off with sheer effort.
Exactly. You're not always flexing that willpower muscle because you've designed your world so you don't have to.
Okay, that's the core insight then.
That's it. The real path to improvement isn't about wishing you had more discipline or, white-knuckling your way through every craving.
It's about proactively creating a more disciplined environment.
Yeah. Like building a fortress around your good intentions instead of just relying on grit when the temptations flood in.
And this whole idea, which seems kind of counterintuitive at first, makes even more sense when you understand how habits actually get wired in our brains.
Right, because once a habit forms, it's not just a conscious choice anymore.
It's like encoded deep down.
Exactly. It's encoded. It's just sitting there ready to be activated whenever the right situation, the right cue pops up.
Okay, give us an example.
Well, think about the story of Patty Allwell. She's a therapist from Austin, Texas. She quit smoking years ago, decades ago, and she also stopped riding horses around the same time.
Okay.
Years later, she hops on a horse again for the first time in ages, and what happens?
Let me guess. She craved the cigarette.
Immediately. An overwhelming craving for the first time in years. The cue being on the horse was still there, deeply ingrained.
Wow. Even after all that time.
The brain just needed that trigger. The urge to act really does follow when those environmental cues reappear.
Which explains why some attempts to change behavior can totally backfire.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of ironic, like shaming obese people with weight loss presentations often just causes stress.
And for many people, stress leads to
comfort eating, their coping strategy. So the presentation meant to deter the behavior actually becomes a stress cue for it.
Or showing smokers those really graphic images of blackened lungs. You'd think that would scare them straight.
Logically, yes. But often, it just increases anxiety.
Which, for a smoker, can be a huge trigger too.
Light up. Yeah, to cope with the anxiety the image just caused. So if you're not really careful, you can accidentally trigger the exact behavior you want to stop.
And bad habits often feed themselves too, don't they? There's a term for that.
Autocatalytic. Yeah, the process feeds itself. They foster the very feelings they're supposed to numb.
Like, you feel bad, so you eat junk food.
But then eating the junk food makes you feel even worse, physically or mentally.
Or you feel sluggish, so you watch more TV.
Which just makes you feel more sluggish, creates a deeper rut. It's this vicious downward spiral.
A really insidious feedback loop. And there's even a scientific term for how cues trigger cravings, right?
Cue-induced wanting, yeah. Where an external trigger creates this almost compulsive craving to repeat a bad habit.
And the triggers can be incredibly subtle.
Unbelievably subtle. There's fascinating research. Scientists showed addicts a picture of cocaine for just 33 milliseconds.
Okay, that's way too fast to consciously see it.
Right. You couldn't tell them what you saw. But even that brief flash still stimulated the reward pathway in their brains. It sparked desire.
Wow. Their brains were already priming them for the drug, even without conscious awareness.
Which leads to the really powerful, maybe slightly sobering conclusion here.
Okay.
You can break a habit, you can stop doing it, but you're probably never going to truly forget it.
Those mental pathways, those grooves, they're still there.
They're incredibly difficult to erase completely, even if they go unused for a long, long time. So just resisting temptation, just relying on willpower.
Exhausting. And maybe not that effective long term.
It's an energy-intensive and, frankly, pretty ineffective strategy in the long run. Like the research keeps showing, we become a product of the environment we live in.
So you're saying it's almost impossible to stick to positive habits if you're constantly in a negative, triggering environment?
Pretty much. I mean, I've never seen someone consistently stick to positive habits in a truly negative environment. It just doesn't work long term.
Okay, so if willpower isn't the answer, if resisting is a losing battle,
yeah,
what is the practical secret? What do we actually do?
It's actually pretty straightforward. In theory at least, you cut the bad habit off at the source.
Meaning?
The most practical, the most effective way to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce, or better yet, completely remove your exposure to the cue that triggers it.
So it's like flipping that first law of behavior change on its head.
Exactly. Instead of making good cues obvious, you make bad cues invisible.
Make it invisible. It sounds almost too simple.
It does, but its power is genuinely surprising. Let's make it concrete.
Okay, yeah. Real examples.
You can't get work done, constantly checking your phone.
Uh-huh. Big problem for many.
Try leaving your phone in another room for a few hours. Just physically remove the cue. Out of sight, often out of mind.
Or maybe you're constantly feeling inadequate comparing yourself.
Think about the social media accounts that trigger jealousy or envy.
And just stop following them.
Just unfollow. Make that cue invisible on your feed.
Okay. What else? Wasting too much time watching TV.
Don't just tell yourself you'll watch less. That relies on willpower. Instead, physically move the TV out of the bedroom.
Or even unplug it. Put it in a closet.
Yeah. Add some friction. Same if you're spending too much on, say, electronics.
Don't read the reviews.
Stop reading the reviews of the latest gear. Those reviews are powerful cues that manufacture desire. Make them invisible.
Playing too many video games.
Don't just rely on self-restraint. Unplug the console. Put it away in a closet after each use.
That little bit of effort to set it up again can break the impulse.
Exactly. That slight friction can be surprisingly effective. These might seem like really small, almost trivial changes.
But they work because they remove the trigger itself.
Precisely. You remove that initial cue, and often the whole habit just fades away because the powerful urge doesn't even arise in the same way.
You don't have to fight it with willpower because the temptation isn't constantly knocking at the door.
Right. So the ultimate secret to self-control really isn't about trying to constantly summon more willpower from somewhere deep inside.
Your energy is better spent elsewhere.
Far, far better spent optimizing your environment. Make the cues for your good habits obvious. Make them easy. Make them visible.
And the opposite for bad habits.
Make the cues for your bad habits invisible. Make them inconvenient. Hide them. Out of reach.
It's about being smarter than your urges, basically. Controlling the environment instead of fighting your desires head-on every single time.
That's the essence of it.
So there you have it. Self-control. It's not this heroic, grueling battle against inner demons that only this super disciplined people can win.
Nope. It's more like a strategic design challenge.
Yeah, architecting your surroundings so the positive choices are just easier, the default even.
And the negative ones are less likely to even pop into your head.
It's not just about managing bad habits, is it? It's about intentionally crafting a life where the good stuff feels more effortless.
Which frees up so much mental energy for things that actually matter to you.
It really is amazing how powerful these small environmental shifts can be. They shape our behavior and ultimately our lives way more than we realize.
It truly shifts the focus, doesn't it? From thinking it's some personal failing to seeing it as a solvable design problem, which puts the power right back in your hands.
So as you go about your day, we want to leave you with this provocative thought.
Yeah, something to chew on.
What's one specific cue in your own environment right now? Something that's consistently triggering a habit you'd like to change.
Just one.
And what tiny adjustment could you make, maybe even right now, to make that cue invisible, or at least harder to encounter?
How might that simple, tiny change start to ripple through your daily life? What space might it create for the positive habits you actually want?